I lost to a single tear from the little secretary. I was abandoned by him on the roadside and left to be ravaged to death. When I opened my eyes, I went back to the day when I first met Adrian. Without hesitation, I chose to keep my distance from him. I turned around and got close to my childhood sweetheart who had sacrificed himself for me in the previous life. However, that scumbag begged me to fall in love with him even if just a little bit. On my birthday. On the way to the cinema in the evening, Adrian's cell phone rang. His newly hired little secretary was crying and saying something. Adrian coaxed her gently. "I'll be there right away. Wait for me, honey." Then he hurriedly urged me to get out of the car. "Today is my birthday. Can you not go?" I pleaded. Adrian frowned. "Alicia, don't be silly. She's all alone here and doesn't know anyone. Besides, I've been with you all day. What more do you want?" "Adrian, this is a newly developed villa area. If you leave me on the roadside like this, how am I supposed to get back?" I smiled bitterly. "You're in such a hurry to see your secretary. People who don't know might think she's your girlfriend." Adrian was stunned for a moment. "Sorry. I'll ask the driver to pick you up. I know you've always been prejudiced against her. She's just a young girl and has it tough. I hope you can be more magnanimous." The cool night wind blew into the car window. Under his slightly anxious urging, I opened the car door. The car sped away, kicking up a cloud of dust. How eager he was to go and comfort his little secretary. I thought that the 13-year relationship should come to an end. Suddenly, a car was following me at a leisurely pace behind me. My limbs went stiff and trembling. I dialed Adrian's number. The moment the call was answered, all my expectations were dashed. Adrian's impatient voice came from the other end. "Alicia. Are you done yet? I told you there's nothing between me and her. Can you stop being so jealous and nagging like a shrew?" My heart ached so painfully that I could hardly breathe. I asked, "When will the driver arrive?" "There's someone." Suddenly, a delicate exclamation came from the other end of the phone, and then the call was hung up. At the same time, my choked cries for help were completely drowned out by the busy signal. A provocative text message from the little secretary popped up on my phone. I reached out and found my face already wet with tears. Wiping away my tears, I stubbornly continued to dial Adrian's number. The call was hung up again and again until finally Adrian blocked me. The pain spread densely in my heart. I swallowed the bitterness in my mouth. I could only resign myself to my fate in despair and helplessness. I was dragged into a car and my clothes were torn to shreds. They pressed down on me one by one with filthy words pouring out of their mouths. The tearing pain pulled at every nerve in my body. They used a blade to slash crisscross cuts on my body. Every time the blade cut my body would suddenly tense up. And then it brought them even more excited and brutal humiliation. I prayed piously, hoping to die quickly. Finally, I was like a broken doll, discarded on the roadside. I don't know how long I had been in a coma. My soul gradually separated from my body. I saw myself lying on the hospital bed with a decadent and desperate Adrian beside me. At that moment, I saw Adrian's eyes meet my soul's. He roared heartbreakingly from shock, "Don't go, Alicia. Let's get married, okay?" I looked at the ring that suddenly appeared on my ring finger and shook my head gently. "Adrian, you're doomed to live in remorse in this life." A white vortex swept over. When I opened my eyes, I was being pulled forward by my mother. There were many luxury cars parked at the entrance of the village. A middle-aged man pushed a cold and aloof teenager in front of everyone. He took out a document and claimed that the two had been swapped at birth. Silas was his real son. My mother reminded Adrian's father to welcome the person into the house. Silas's family had been living abroad for years due to business and had always been neglecting to accompany the child, so the choice was left to Silas. Silas looked at me, and before I knew it, I was already in tears. I remembered how in the previous life, he rushed into the hospital ward with bloodshot eyes. His fierce and violent fists mercilessly smashed into Adrian's face. And then he used various means like private detectives and the underworld to torture those bastards severely and sent them to prison. After the funeral, he took a whole bottle of sleeping pills in front of my tombstone. On that day, I saw him shed so many tears. Thinking of this, I looked at him pleadingly. In the previous life, because of his awkward identity and because I had always been looking at Adrian and never gave him a single glance, he chose to leave without hesitation. We wouldn't meet again at university until 6 years later. He walked up to me and wiped away my tears. "You're such a big girl and still crying." "Okay, I won't leave. Don't cry anymore." In the end, the two of them exchanged surnames. Silas paid for his own living expenses and temporarily stayed at Adrian's father's house. In the evening, my mother cooked a big table of dishes. Our two families had been close friends for generations. Last year, after my father passed away, we hadn't gotten together much to avoid suspicion. Adrian's father drank a lot of wine and hugged Adrian and Silas, crying bitterly. In this life, Adrian's father finally didn't have to endure the pain of suddenly having Silas taken away from his life as in the previous life. During the 3 years of junior high school, I was the only girl that Adrian recognized and allowed to get close to him. As expected, we were still together in high school. Silas became much more steady, and his concern for me continued to increase. During the summer vacation when we returned home, we gathered to have hot pot in the evening. I bit into a juicy beef ball, and the juice splashed all over my face. In an instant, 2 tissues were handed to me. Under Adrian's somewhat expectant gaze, I took the tissue handed by Silas. This kind of situation happened many times. Every time I saw Adrian's lonely expression, I just pretended not to see it. The next day, we went for a stroll in the mountains. We picked a whole basket of mushrooms. Thinking of the delicious dishes like stewed potatoes with hazel mushrooms, stewed chicken with mushrooms, stewed ribs with hazel mushrooms, and wild mushroom soup, I couldn't help drooling and then excitedly twisted my ankle. Adrian immediately squatted down to check. I quietly pulled my foot out of Adrian's palm. I opened my arms towards Silas, who was coming this way. Silas carried me on his back, holding my shoes in his hand. Adrian carried the mushrooms and followed behind us, looking at me snuggling on Silas's back. His expression was gloomy and unclear. In the evening, after my mother scolded me, she still cooked a big table of mushroom dishes for us. I watched Adrian's father looking at his 2 sons affectionately, with the look of a contented old father. Then I looked at my mother. Since these 2 guys came, she hadn't given me a single glance. Not even a single one. I felt inexplicably lost. Mom was still enthusiastically putting food on their plates with chopsticks left and right, while in my bowl, there were only the bits of food that had fallen on the table and she picked up. Evil thoughts sprang up in my mind. As the saying goes, red umbrella, white stem, eat them and lie down dead. What if I happened to eat a poisonous mushroom? I don't believe they could still ignore me. I got up and left, steeling myself, stomping my feet and gritting my teeth. I took a sip. Oh my God! What's this taste? It was really disgusting. I had to spit it out quickly. I rushed back to the stool in 2 or 3 steps and began to convulse all over, foaming at the mouth. My mother was the first to react and jumped up. Just as my eyes were halfway rolled back, my mother firmly pressed on my philtrum, which made me so sober. I rolled my eyes, and the foam in my mouth gushed out like it was free. My mother cried and asked Adrian's father and the others to go to the latrine to scoop up some manure water. She immediately said to pour it down my throat and then added, "Scoop more. If something happens to us later, we should prepare some in advance just in case." This was the most thorough folk remedy for inducing vomiting in the countryside. I was caught in a dilemma. Things had deviated from what I had planned. I just wanted to test my mother's love for me, not to. The moment I thought of the manure water in the latrine, I couldn't help it. When I saw Adrian's father hurriedly bringing me the manure water, I vomited up all the food I had just eaten. Oh my God, I just drank some plain boiled water with a little detergent in it. It shouldn't be like this. If I really had to drink that bowl of manure water, I guess I would really die and die thoroughly. Under the threat of the manure water, I stopped convulsing, my eyes stopped rolling back. The foam had long been spat out until there was none left, and I didn't dare to pretend to be unconscious anymore, for fear that they would use the manure water to revive me with some strange ideas. Finally, with Adrian's father's strong persuasion and the desperate protection of Adrian and Silas, I wasn't beaten black and blue by my mother. I tightly grasped Silas's sleeve and went back to Uncle Shin's house with him. Because I was afraid that my mother would give me a combined and fancy beating in the middle of the night. In this way, I stayed at Adrian's father's house for a small part of the summer vacation. It wasn't until it was almost time for school to start that my mother calmed down. It's just that I didn't want to leave. I reluctantly went back home 2 days before school started. Don't ask me why. The answer is that I was spoiled. I was very spoiled. Adrian's father's family doted on me a lot. I was like a sweet bun, serving as an emotional filler for them. Except for Adrian, who looked at me longingly. Adrian's father had 2 more wrinkles around his eyes when he smiled because of me. I had always been a carefree and cheerful girl since I was a child. It's just that in my previous life, Adrian liked girls who were calm and quiet. So I sealed up my true nature, and in this life, I reopened that seal. I couldn't wait to jump around, up and down, and I could hardly hold myself back. Well, actually, I could try to hold myself back as much as possible. Just like at this moment, facing my mother's endless scolding like a storm. Finally, after I handed in a 3,000-word self-criticism and a 1,000-word guarantee letter, the mushroom incident was completely over. As time went by, my relationship with Silas got better and better. I became more and more polite and distant towards Adrian, and he became more and more silent. It didn't matter. Anyway, in this life, I just wanted to keep my distance from him. Later, we applied for the same high school. In the new semester of Senior 3, a new classmate came to our class. After seeing that face that was slightly charming beneath its youthful look, I dug my nails hard into my palm. She was Adrian's green tea little secretary in the previous life, Aria. I don't know how many provocative text messages from her were on my phone before I died. She skipped 2 grades and transferred to our school with excellent grades this time. Could it be that because of my rebirth, the gears of fate had changed? Also, there were indeed many differences in this life itself. I watched quietly to see what would happen, but she tried every means to break into our group. In study, she always wanted to compete with me and tried to attract Adrian's attention with the image of an ambitious and hardworking top student, but she was always defeated by me. Later, she changed her strategy. She looked at Adrian pitifully with her beautiful eyes full of affection and pestered him to answer questions. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that she liked Adrian. But unlike in the previous life when he was nervous and protective of her, in this life Adrian always kept a lukewarm distance from her. Instead, he always seized every opportunity to get close to me from time to time. Until one day, Aria found me and pleaded weakly, "Alicia, could you please let Adrian brother be mine? He won't like you. The reason he's nice to you is just because of the family affection over the years. He still can't see his own heart clearly now. Could you please stay away from him in the future?" I sneered in my heart and said with a bit of a headache, "I can't control his legs. It's him who loves to stick around me. I'm not the one who's eager to cling to him. Or you'd better persuade him to transfer to another school. Then I can stay far away from him." I looked at Aria's distorted face due to jealousy and just felt a sense of satisfaction. Finally, she couldn't help but stop me at the staircase entrance and then gave me a provocative smile. Immediately after that, there was a scream, "Ah!" She rolled down the stairs. After a long while, she struggled to prop herself up, looking at me with teary eyes and biting her lip tightly. When she saw Adrian appear behind me, she was so aggrieved that tears kept falling. "Sister Alicia, I know you don't like me and aren't happy that I'm fitting in with you. That's why you deliberately pushed me downstairs. I don't blame you. I just like brother Adrian so much that I couldn't help but want to get close to you guys." Hearing this, Adrian looked at me with a reproachful gaze. He quickly walked up to Aria and picked her up horizontally. He said softly to Aria, "I'll apologize to you on behalf of Alicia. I'll take you to the infirmary first." I sneered and blocked their way. Adrian immediately frowned. "Alicia, it's your fault in this matter. Don't be unreasonable anymore. In my previous life, I don't know how many times I was hurt by his words, unreasonable. Every time he stood by Aria's side and reprimanded me, and then tried every means to coax me to forgive him later. My mood was often like a roller coaster, going up and down because of him. I smiled bitterly. How stupid I was in my previous life. Adrian, in this life, I won't be sad or hurt because of your words anymore. I met Aria's smug and complacent gaze, raised my hand and slapped her hard. The crisp sound echoed throughout the entire corridor. I looked at the corner of her bleeding lip and curled my lip with a sneer. I rubbed my aching tiger's mouth. I felt an unprecedented sense of relief in my heart. Do you still think I'm the pushover who let her provoke and bully me in my previous life? Well, she's terribly wrong. Adrian's expression turned a bit colder. Alicia, apologize. More and more classmates gathered around, chatting in groups of 3 or 5. Aria was crying and speaking in that affected way, and Adrian was gently lowering his head to comfort her. No matter how you looked at it, I seemed to be the vicious female supporting role who pushed the female lead downstairs out of jealousy. If this matter wasn't handled well, I would become notorious tomorrow. I didn't miss the provocative gaze that Aria deliberately cast at me. I took out my mobile phone video and held it in front of the two of them so that they could see it clearly. Then I turned it around for the classmates around to watch thoroughly. Everyone gasped in shock and looked at Aria with an expression that seemed to say they wanted to stay away from this troublemaker. I successfully saw Aria's face gradually lose its color. I sneered, Aria, you're really good at using these despicable tricks to steal a man. You'd better stay away from me in the future. I feel disgusted just seeing you. Also, I won't like Adrian in this life. Don't regard me as your imaginary enemy anymore. The air around me suddenly turned cold. I ignored the complicated emotions in Adrian's eyes. I just gave him a meaningful look and then turned around and left. I believe that tomorrow the school will go crazy making up stories about the love and hatred among the 3 of us. And I'll be the innocent and pitiful victim. After that, Adrian tried to talk to me alone several times, but I refused. Soon, the college entrance examination came. Sadly, we were admitted to the same university. I should say that those 2 tagalongs had to follow us and apply to the same university. I kind of don't understand. Isn't it the right way for these 2 to stay together? However, the way Adrian looked at me always had an unusual air. I secretly pulled Silas and arrived at the school to register early. Some enthusiastic senior students came up to offer their attentions, but Silas blocked them one by one. He looked at my face, took out a disposable mask a bit irritably and put it on for me. Only then did his slightly furrowed handsome eyebrows completely relax. After we each tidied up our dormitories, we went out of the school to eat hot pot in the evening. I swallowed when looking at the boiling food. Just as I was about to pick up my chopsticks to grab some food, my hand was gently held down. Silas took away my chopsticks, took off the rubber band on my wrist. He walked behind me, smoothed my hair and tied it up for me. Then he affectionately rubbed the top of my head and handed the chopsticks back to me. My cheeks were slightly flushed by the steam from the hot pot. Silas put the food that I usually like to eat into my bowl. And he poured me some fruit juice. Actually, Silas doesn't like hot pot. He just accommodates me, a foodie. In my previous life, Adrian didn't like hot pot either, but it was always me who gave in and accommodated him. In this life, I finally know what it means to be favored and fearless. I touched my round little belly and was forcibly pulled by Silas to take a walk. We walked along the road, looking at this strange and exciting city. My hand was held by his warm palm. I felt a bit embarrassed and wanted to pull it back, but he held it tightly. Suddenly, a car sped by beside us, and Silas pulled me into his arms. I pushed him away and stood there flustered, but my face was already blushing. After Adrian and Aria entered the school, they wanted to invite us to dinner. I looked at Adrian with a look of horror and said righteously, "Stay away from troublemakers and cherish life." "Start from me." I pointed at Aria. "I won't participate in any activities where she shows up in the future." I looked at Arya's colorful face like a palette and laughed wildly in my heart. Serves you right. You little green tea bitch. Arya's eyes were filled with tears, on the verge of falling, looking pitiful. She said in a soft and delicate voice, "Brother Adrian, Sister Alicia hasn't gotten over what happened last time yet. I'm just so in love with you that I wanted to attract your attention. I'm really sorry. I know I was wrong." After saying that, she bit her lip, and tears like rolling pearls fell down her face one by one. Adrian hurriedly wiped away her tears and comforted her softly. Then he looked at me. "Alicia, Arya already knows she's wrong. Don't argue with her anymore, okay?" I looked at him coldly. "Don't you understand Chinese? Then go and get your ears checked." Adrian couldn't bear to leave Arya, who was crying pitifully, so the dinner plan had to be dropped. Silas gave Adrian a look of disappointment and pulled me to turn around and leave. Whether in the previous life or this life, Adrian would always choose Arya between me and her in the end. Even on our 7th anniversary of being in a relationship, he didn't hesitate to abandon me and rushed to send Arya, who had a fever, to the hospital. That night, I sat in the restaurant until it closed, and finally, I was politely asked to leave by the waiter. The Adrian who said he'd be back soon stayed in the hospital with Arya the whole night. That time, I resolutely broke up with him. Adrian's eyes were red with anger. He trapped me on the bed and punished me fiercely again and again. No matter how much I cried and begged for mercy, he wouldn't let me go until he forced me to change my mind. He swore to me that there was really nothing between him and Arya and that he would be more careful in the future. I compromised because of the feelings I had given for over a decade. Pulling my thoughts back, I looked at the sunset that dyed the sky red. Fortunately, God gave me a chance to start over. Arya was provoked by my ruthlessness that day and secretly asked people to block me in the toilet. She looked at me arrogantly. "Alicia, as long as you kneel down and kowtow to me to admit your mistake today, I'll forgive you for your disrespect to me." I looked at one of the girls who looked like a big sister. I sneered in my heart. It seemed that she wanted to carry out campus bullying. It's kind of impressive that Arya could build connections in such a short time. I even doubted whether she was also reborn with a scheming mind. The painful experience in my previous life was always engraved in my mind. After being reborn, one of the main things I did was to practice Taekwondo hard during the winter and summer vacations. It's just that the schoolwork in Senior 3 was a bit tight, so I put it aside temporarily. I gave Arya the middle finger. Then I loosened my muscles and bones, picked up the mop handle beside me. In everyone's sight, I broke it in half with my knee. Immediately, I swept a warning look around. "If you don't want to be beaten so badly that your mother won't even recognize you, stay away from me." Then I took off my clothes and wrapped the broken half of the stick. Because in this way, no matter how hard you hit someone, there would be no visible marks. I walked towards Arya. The stick in my hand aimed at the vulnerable but not easily damaged parts of the human body. Arya was in so much pain that she called for help around her. I pitied her naivety. She really expected to develop some life-and-death friendships with them in just a few days. Most people in the world are bullies who prey on the weak and fear the strong. I looked at Arya lying on the ground, moaning in pain, with snot and tears all over her face. "Does it hurt? I suffered much more pain than you in my previous life." The people around were already scared out of their previous bravado by me. I said to the girl who looked like a big sister, my voice cold and stern, "You should be thankful that I didn't hurt the innocent." I thought this matter was settled. Surely Arya, the bully, wouldn't go to the teacher to complain about me. Unexpectedly, it was Adrian who stopped me and questioned me in the end. "Alicia, can't you and Arya get along peacefully? She just wanted to scare you, but you beat her so badly that she can't even get out of bed now. Look, he's already using a nickname for her. I don't know what kind of bewitching soup he's been fed again." I was ranting crazily in my heart. My eyes weren't idle either. I carefully examined him. Adrian at this moment was like a stupid love-struck fool in a romance novel who had been brainwashed. I really wanted to pour out his brain and clean it up. To see if there were some brainless and shitty things inside. I corrected him. Adrian, are you a worm in her stomach? What makes you so sure that she just wanted to scare me? She clearly said that she wanted me to kneel down and apologize to her. Adrian at this moment was like a stupid love-struck fool in a romance novel who had been brainwashed. I'm afraid I'll become stupid if I deal with someone like you whose name is just 2 letters put together. Go back and take good care of your delicate and helpless Arya. Don't be an eyesore here. He was forced back by my words step by step. I pushed him away and walked away with big steps. The life in freshman year was busy and fulfilling. Every day Silas and I went to the cafeteria to have meals together. The food I liked would always end up on my plate. A boy came over and shyly handed me a love letter. I saw Silas' expression turn cold inch by inch. I felt a bit guilty and put the love letter aside. Open it. Silas, who had always been gentle with me, now had a cold voice. I obediently wanted to open it, but Silas snatched it away. The envelope was crumpled into a ball and thrown into the trash can under the table. That night, I was blocked by a slightly drunk Silas in the study room. I looked around at the empty and somewhat deserted classroom and swallowed nervously. He, with a bit of drunkenness, was extremely domineering at this moment. He rolled up his sleeves. He casually unbuttoned 2 buttons of his shirt, revealing his muscular and powerful chest. He leaned over and trapped me in his arms. I was forced to endure the oncoming masculine hormonal aura. I could only shrink my body back again and again, leaning against the desk to keep a certain distance from him. But my heart was pounding in my chest. Meeting his aggressive gaze that seemed to want to devour me whole, my body somehow went a bit limp. Silas rubbed my waist, which was aching a bit from being bumped, and then pulled me into his arms. His firm and powerful chest was so hot that it made my whole body warm up. The faint aroma of wine on him filled my nostrils, making me intoxicated. Alicia, have I been spoiling you too much, huh? How dare you accept someone else's love letter? He gently stroked my lips. The drunken look in the corners of his eyes made him look even more wild and unrestrained. Baby, I want to kiss you. I want to hear your sweet moans for me. His deep and mellow voice rushed into my ears, making my ears turn red. Alicia, will you be my girlfriend? I pushed him but couldn't move him. Let me go first. He domineeringly held me tighter, his voice hoarse and charming. I won't let go until you agree. He lifted me onto the desk. As his warm breath approached, a passionate kiss, like a punishment, fell upon me. The sound of sucking and smacking was particularly obvious in the empty classroom. He reluctantly let me go, so that I could take a big breath. I cursed, you rascal. Silas kissed my neck, making my whole body tremble. He held me in his arms and said with a naughty smile, tell me, will you be my girlfriend or not? I blushed slightly, cleared my throat, and pretended to be angry. You want me to agree just with a few words? You don't even have a bouquet of roses. Silas held me in his arms and spun me around crazily. After kissing me until I was dizzy with passion again, he disappeared from my sight like the wind. That night, I agreed to Silas's pursuit among the sea of candles downstairs in the dormitory. The next day, Adrian, who had disappeared from in front of me for a long time, tightly grasped my wrist. Did you really agree to date him? I shook off his hand and walked away with big steps. My response to him was that Silas and I were always seen together every day and had extremely intimate interactions. Recently, Silas joined the basketball club. There was a girl named Daphne in it who was very close to Arya. She often lingered around the several boys in the club. I saw it twice that she brought water for Silas and took a towel to wipe his sweat for him, but Silas directly refused her every time. Just 2 days ago, I happened to hear Arya telling her to find a way to seduce Silas. Now she was running over, looking me up and down. Sister, do you also want to join the club? It seems that you don't know much about basketball. However, if you're interested, I can teach you. It's just that it's very tiring, and I'm afraid you won't be able to persevere. Moreover, since there are mostly boys here, it's quite a test of emotional intelligence to get along with them. I smiled and asked her, I remember we're the same age, right? To try to claim kinship with me, why did you even change your age? Does your family know that you're working so hard? Daphne's face instantly turned red, and she said carefully, "Did I say something wrong and make you unhappy, sister? I didn't mean it." After saying that, she lowered her head, twisted the corner of her clothes pitifully, and tears started falling down. I asked curiously, "Huh? Where did you come from, you old green tea? Not only are you brittle, but you also leave crumbs everywhere." "I didn't bully you. Don't try to pull a fast one on me. I'm just suggesting that you don't rush to claim sisterhood everywhere. I didn't hit or scold you. Why are you crying? I think you're not suitable to stay in the basketball club. With such a fragile heart, you should go to the Dream of the Red Chamber. Linda, you would have to give her seat to you. My boyfriend is right beside me. I won't trouble you to come and serve him specially." When Daphne saw Silas walking towards us, her tears immediately fell down like a waterfall. Silas glanced at Daphne and said, "Please don't come to disturb my girlfriend," directly blocking the tea-like words that Daphne was about to say. I pinched Silas's waist, and he gritted his teeth and looked at me innocently. I angrily said to him, "I won't accompany you here anymore in the future. I'm afraid that one day I'll be so disgusted by someone that I'll throw up even the food from last night." Silas held me back, looked at Daphne, and said with a smile, "Okay, if our Alicia doesn't like it, then I won't come either." On that very day, Silas quit the club. He pulled me to a secluded shady spot, trapped me in his arms and said, "I'm so obedient. Doesn't Alicia want to give me a reward?" I blushed with shame. All my senses focused on my neck where his warm breath was spraying. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming and was so scared that I quickly buried myself in his arms. I heard his low laughter coming from his chest. Silas held me and buried his face in my neck. He murmured, "Alicia, you smell so good, really good." I blushed with shame and broke free from Silas's embrace and ran back to the dormitory. After having a good sleep, I became an online celebrity. The video of Daphne crying pitifully in front of me in the afternoon was widely spread on the school forum, and Daphne herself also posted a short essay online, insinuating that someone was narrow-minded. She just gave a bottle of water to someone's boyfriend out of politeness, but that person aggressively came to question her. What? Making something out of nothing and turning the tables? Arya was also the uploader of this video, commenting to comfort Daphne, "Baby, don't be sad. You still have me." I complained in my heart, "Damn it. It's really disgusting to the extreme." That night, I posted the recording of Juan Uero and Daphne conspiring to seduce Silas online. Come on. Make some waves. It would be best if there could be huge waves to smash these two shameless bitches onto the beach. This recording quickly spread online. Some girls who had been tricked by Daphne before showed the chat records of Daphne's shady attempts to seduce others. The writing was so sophisticated that even I, who had lived two lives, blushed with embarrassment. Arya was then labeled as vicious, hypocritical, and evil-hearted. Even some parents called the principal's office, asking to expel such students who were spoiling the school atmosphere. Finally, Arya and Daphne were given a serious demerit and were publicly criticized. Netizens suggested that they should read more books on moral and ideological education. If Adrian hadn't come to me again, I would surely have been happy about this for half a month. "Alicia, why do you always do things so thoroughly? Even if she's wrong, couldn't you solve it privately? You posting the recording online has caused great harm to Arya. She's taking antidepressant drugs every day. After all, she's a girl. How will she be able to stand on her feet in school in the future? If Silas really loves you wholeheartedly, even if others try to seduce him, they won't succeed. I'm in a difficult position caught between you two. This time, you've gone too far." I sneered, "Are you out of your mind? Don't give me that crap about the victim being blamed." Arya instigated Daphne to seduce Silas first, then came to provoke me, and also posted a baseless video online. So I deserve to be calculated and framed by them? What's wrong with me retaliating with a recording? My hands are mine. I can post whatever I want. Can you control it? I'm not a saint or a white lotus. I won't forgive those who hurt me. That's only for TV shows. Stop trying to build a good reputation for Arya, who's acting like a slut, in front of me. There's a saying that if you don't seek death, you won't die. Do you understand? Adrian's eyes were bloodshot at the corners. Alicia, can't you talk to me nicely? I sneered, I'm really sorry. I'm not like Arya, that green tea bitch, who can please you. I completely broke off with Adrian. Adrian didn't realize it until he found that I had blocked all his social media accounts. He came to me many times trying to mend our relationship, but I treated him coldly. Occasionally when we met and he took the initiative to greet me, I also ignored him. In the blink of an eye, it was the winter vacation. Silas and I went home together. Adrian didn't come back until 2 days before the spring festival. On New Year's Eve, I gave my mother a bank card with 300,000 yuan in it. My mother was so excited that she wiped her tears. During the New Year's Eve dinner, Silas kept putting food on my plate for me. Adrian stared at Silas and me for a long time. Every year, Adrian's father and my mother would get us drunk. This year was no exception. Silas and I were drunk and lay on the table. Adrian's father and my mother worked together to drag Silas back home. After they left, Adrian put down the chopsticks he was using to pick up food. He carried me into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. I felt that I was wrapped in a warm embrace. I rubbed against it and found a comfortable position and fell into a deep sleep. Adrian let out a soft sigh, filled with a touch of sadness. He murmured, his voice so soft that it seemed like he was talking to himself, "So this is what it feels like to hold you in my arms. I've hugged you many times in my dreams. But even when I hold you in my arms, it feels like you're so far away from me. Unlike now, you're warm, soft, and so dependent on me. You're so cruel. You don't even give me the courage to tell you that I like you. Why don't you smile at me? Why don't you accept my care? Why don't you like me, even just a little bit? Why can Silas but I can't? I'm jealous that he can have all your emotions. I told myself to stay away from you. But I can't help wanting to get closer to you and take you away from him. But I can only be a jealous ghost in the dark. I don't dare to show it for fear that you'll push me even further away. Alicia, please look at me. I'm still here beside you. It's not just Silas. I also like you very much, very much. I slept through the night without dreaming. On the morning of the first day of the Lunar New Year, firecrackers were going off everywhere. I wanted to play with firecrackers, but I was too scared to light them myself. So I had to beg Silas to help me set them off. Silas aimed at the door, lit the firecrackers, and they rushed out. They got into Adrian's father's clothes. I suppressed my excitement inside, grabbed the melon seeds beside me. Then I sat there cracking melon seeds while watching Silas running around in a panic. When Adrian's father had almost vented his anger, I rescued Silas. That night, I was blocked by him in a secluded place and was severely punished by him. I touched my lips, which were swollen from his sucking, and cursed, "Silas, you took advantage of me again." In my sophomore year, I decided to rent an apartment off campus. Silas insisted on following me. We chose a 2-bedroom, 1 living room apartment and decorated it into a warm and comfortable little nest. He would put on an apron for me and cook delicious meals. When I was washing the dishes, he would wrap his arms around my waist and gently rub my neck. We often nestled on the soft sofa, watched romantic love movies, and then kissed passionately, reluctant to part. We would fill the place with our favorite snacks for each other and prepare birthday surprises. We would also take meticulous care of each other when we were sick. Life was comfortable, reassuring, and a little bit inseparable. Until recently, I suddenly became obsessed with Zhang Yixing. I couldn't help but secretly change the recipient name on my express delivery to Zhang Yixing's little wife. I saw Silas standing in front of me with a cold expression, holding the express delivery. I turned around and ran. I rushed towards the bedroom but was caught by Silas around the waist. I shouted in my heart, "What a sin! How could I forget about him?" He ordered me to hand over my phone and urged me to change the name to Silas's little wife. Then he unbuttoned his shirt, trapped me in his arms, and kissed me hard. I practiced countless poses in my mind to overpower him. In reality, when I saw his firm and powerful chest and his well-defined 8-pack abs, I immediately became weak and couldn't take care of myself. Finally, I went limp in his arms. Since that night, he shamelessly occupied the other side of my bed. After taking a shower, I sat on the stool and he dried my hair for me. I earnestly advised him that we should sleep in separate rooms. Taking cold showers all the time wasn't a good solution. He held my hand in his palm and kneaded it gently. His warm breath sprayed on my ear, and his magnetic and charming voice made my face flush and my heart race. Alicia, you can also help me. I think I'll be very comfortable. His words instantly made my face turn red. Then my lips were kissed, and he took my hand and guided it to satisfy himself. In the second half of our junior year, Silas gave me a little fur ball. It was so cute and cuddly. I named it Silas. Silas protested, but his protest was invalid. Adrian and Arya got together after getting drunk once. First, Arya sent me a picture of them kissing, and then a video of them fooling around in bed. Arya, Alicia, I've got him. You'll always be defeated by me. I calmly called her, you idiot. Do you think you two will become famous if I post this online? Otherwise you two can just wait to be the protagonists of a scandal. I really should thank you for providing me with such good material. Remember, you only have one night to think about it, otherwise you two can just wait to be the protagonists of a scandal. I really should thank you for providing me with such good material. Remember, you only have one night to think about it. After hanging up the phone, I blocked and deleted her. Then I removed Adrian's phone number from the blacklist, forwarded the photos and videos to him, and warned him that if he didn't want to become famous in a bad way, he should keep his girlfriend in check and not let her send such disgusting videos everywhere. After everything was done, I put him back on the blocked list. The next day, Arya became famous on the campus forum again. Someone uploaded the video of her shouting, "I'm a bitch," and I casually gave it a big like. 4 years passed quickly, and finally, we graduated. The income from the self-media I managed was quite good. The stocks I had been investing in also had a good return. I sighed. Finally, we're going to enter society. The accident happened so suddenly. I was stopped by Adrian on my way back to the apartment. He pinned me in his arms. He lowered his head, trying to kiss me, but I slapped his face hard and turned it aside. I cursed angrily, "Adrian, are you crazy?" He was pushed away by me forcefully, and his body slid down along the side of the building in a dejected manner. His ashen eyes were dull. "Alicia, recently a lot of memories have flooded into my mind. Those are all real, right? Give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? I broke up with Arya. I didn't want to be with her. She drugged me when I was drunk." As he said that, he took out a knife and put it against his neck, shouting hysterically and sickly, "Come back to me obediently or I'll kill myself." "Alicia, I can't live without you." I frowned and denied, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Drugged?" I sneered in my heart. I in my previous life, less than 3 months after I died, Arya knocked on his door wearing a thin nightgown. Under Arya's repeated provocations, they hugged and kissed passionately. I saw with my own eyes that Adrian eagerly tore off Arya's nightgown. He took Arya's hand and undid his belt, going further. At that moment, I wished I could curse them to death, until the phone rang and interrupted their final step. It was the police informing that the criminals who had humiliated me had been caught. Only then did Adrian wake up from his dream and coldly shouted at Arya to get out. Facing my cold and resolute denial, Adrian smiled bitterly, "So that's why everything makes sense now. The disgust in your eyes and the hatred you sometimes showed towards me. And your loathing for Arya. But Alicia, you clearly loved me. You clearly loved me so deeply before. I won't give up. I'll win you back. You." There was a strong and paranoid possessiveness in his eyes. Before he could finish his words, Silas rushed out, snatched the knife from him, and punched him twice in the face. All the panic and helplessness were instantly dissipated by Adrian's 2 black eyes. I stood on tiptoe and gently kissed Silas on the cheek. Then I took his hand and turned to leave. Behind us were Adrian's unwilling roars. In the evening, Silas took me to have a big dinner. On the way back, he parked the car and ran to the supermarket, not allowing me to follow. When he came back, his hands were emptied. In the evening, I was teased by him and felt a bit hot. He asked in a low voice, "Alicia, is it okay?" I gave him a passionate kiss in return. That night, we crossed the line for the first time and couldn't get enough of it. For 2 consecutive days, except for having meals, we basically spent the time lying in bed. If Arya hadn't been constantly pushing the limits and causing trouble, I would have been so happy that I'd be bubbling with joy. At this moment, I suppressed my nervousness, tried my best to ignore the sense of oppression brought by the footsteps behind me, and maintained my usual pace as much as possible. I took my hand out of my bag and clenched it tightly. Recently, I took a food promotion job in a remote place, and I was on my way back at this moment. Suddenly, an arm stretched out across my neck, trying to cover my mouth and nose. I immediately grabbed his arm and threw him over my shoulder onto the ground. I snatched the towel from his hand and firmly covered his face with it. After a while, he gave up struggling. I sat on the ground limply, and the pepper spray I had been clutching tightly rolled aside. The strength I had lost due to the shock slowly came back. I rummaged through his phone and, sure enough, found the chat records with Arya. I clenched the phone tightly. After seeing the face of the man beside me clearly, the infinite anger that had accumulated in me spread from my chest to every part of my body. Every cell in my body was screaming, "Kill him! Kill him!" This man was the leader of those who had humiliated me in my previous life. I lifted my foot and kicked him hard repeatedly until my rationality gradually returned. I suppressed the crazy thought of killing him, took out the soft belt that was used as decoration around my waist, tied him up tightly, and dragged him to the police station. Ignoring the police's obstruction, I rushed forward, pinned Arya, who had just been brought in for interrogation, under me, and slapped her hard. Finally, I even punched her. I couldn't remember how many times I hit her, nor could I hear the chaotic and buzzing sounds around me. Arya had 2 front teeth knocked out by me, her whole face was swollen beyond recognition, and blood was gushing out of her mouth. Finally, I was pulled away by Silas, who rushed over and held tightly in his arms. He lovingly wiped away my tears that couldn't stop flowing. After seeing my bloodshot eyes that looked like an evil spirit's, he angrily ran over and kicked Arya, who had just been helped up, back to the ground. He lifted his foot and kicked her until she fell to the ground, groaning in pain. The police painstakingly separated the two of us, and the police station finally regained its usual calm. With both witnesses and evidence, Arya was sent to prison by me. Silas stayed by my side every step of the way. He took me to and from the psychologist's office and our apartment. It wasn't until the psychologist repeatedly assured that I was okay that he gradually relaxed the nerves that had been tense for days. In the evening, he prepared a candlelight dinner and took out the diamond ring that he had prepared for a long time. With his eyes slightly red at the corners, Silas knelt on one knee and said in a trembling voice, "Alicia, let's get married." A week later, we went back to our hometown, and Adrian was there too. He looked at me quietly, with an unfathomable pain in his eyes, and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry. I failed to protect you in both lives." I remained silent. I really couldn't face him with a normal heart. The next day, Silas brought his parents to propose marriage. We set the wedding date. On the wedding day, my mother personally handed me over to Silas. He said, "Alicia, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life on behalf of your father." That day, Adrian drank a lot of wine and passed out drunk. When he woke up, he went crazy and came to find me. I was protected by Silas behind him. Adrian pleaded, "Alicia, my heart hurts so much. Could you divorce him and give me another chance? I won't abandon you for others anymore. As long as you're willing to come back to me, I'll do anything you ask." Silas fought with him. I stood between them and forcibly separated them. I raised my hand and slapped Adrian several times with all my strength. I rubbed my aching palm and said coldly, "Stop pestering me. I love Silas and only Silas. Both you and Arya make me sick." Adrian left, dejected. He locked himself in the room all day long, drinking alone. Adrian's father knelt on the ground and begged me to persuade Adrian once. I quickly helped him up. Finally, for Adrian's father's sake, I went to find Adrian. I said to him, "Some things once missed are gone forever. Don't be so persistent about things that can't be undone. There will never be a possibility between you and me. Adrian's father is already old, yet he's so worried about you that he can't eat or sleep, sighing all day long, and even knelt down for me. If you're still a man, cheer up." Looking at him lying on the ground like a pile of mud, I knew that Adrian was ruined in this life. I turned and left, and the thick night swallowed my figure. The girl who once had eyes only for him had already disappeared without a trace in countless disappointments. Finished. In the previous life, for the sake of his first love, he drained my bone marrow. We didn't have children in my whole life. When his first love's husband passed away at the age of 50, he wept with joy and divorced me. Then he married his first love. Their family of 3 reunited, leaving me alone to live out my days in loneliness. He said that he had accompanied me for half of my life and the remaining half should be given to his children. Ironically, after I died, in my spiritual state, I found out that his first love didn't have leukemia at all. Looking at the wedding invitation in my hand, tears streamed down my face. Leofric beside me gently wiped away my tears with his hand. "After we get married, I'll be all yours." He thought I was happy that I could finally marry him. He took it for granted that marrying him was my greatest wish. I nodded and wiped away my tears. "Things will be different in the future. Because I've been reborn. I don't want you anymore in this life." "Congratulations, sister. You're finally getting married to Leofric. Unlike me, I don't have many years left to live." Lilith's affected voice suddenly came from behind. I felt a chill run down my spine and my body tensed up. Lilith walked in front of Leofric and me. She was wearing a white dress with light makeup on and a nice chestnut wig on her head. She was in good spirits but always said that she didn't have many years left to live. "Why are you here?" Leofric took her hand and sat her down beside him. He picked up a sample of the wedding invitation from the table and admired it very much. "It looks good. Of course. I'm a professional designer." Lilith smiled innocently. She completely ignored why she appeared in this wedding company, which was neither in the business district nor on her way. The person in charge of the wedding company had a strange look on his face. "I wish I could also have a wedding invitation. Unfortunately, I'm not fated to have one in this life." Leofric held her hand tightly, looking very nervous. "What nonsense are you talking? Lilith is so beautiful and gentle. Many young men would want to marry you." I felt a gaze. Lilith was looking at me. She wanted to see me looking jealous. I just put down the invitation in my hand casually and said to the person in charge of the wedding company, whose smile froze on his face, "Print it like this then. Anyway, I'm not getting married anymore. It doesn't matter what the invitation looks like or who designed it." In the previous life, on the day of the wedding, Lilith suddenly fell seriously ill and needed a bone marrow transplant. Just before the wedding started, Leofric dragged me to the hospital regardless of everything and asked me to have a bone marrow transplant for Lilith. After everything was done, due to a fever and various discomforts in my body, I lay in the hospital for 2 days. During these 2 days, I learned a terrifying fact. I had been silently matched for bone marrow without my knowledge. I needed to be injected with a cell mobilization agent for 4 consecutive days, then about 10 milliliters of blood would be collected and tested for HLA typing together with the patient's blood. And I had no impression of it at all. In the previous life, I thought Lilith was really dying, so I didn't care about it. Now that I know she wasn't sick at all and did all these things, I couldn't describe how I felt. Hate. Yes, I hated. But the one I hated was Leofric. He was the instigator of everything. I was blind in the previous life, but not in this one. I picked up the phone and called Caius, the executive producer who was far away in Tanzania. Caius was very happy to hear my voice. She immediately invited me to participate in their next shooting task at the shooting location. The time was on the 15th of next month. Fortunately, the result was similar to what I expected. They were still short of people. This project was to shoot wild animals on the verge of extinction around the world, appealing to everyone to protect the earth. It also aimed to leave precious images for those animals that were about to disappear. Let future generations know that they had existed. All the crew members were female. Caius had specially invited me before, but Leofric refused on my behalf. Most of the shooting locations for this kind of shooting were in remote mountains, wild rainforests, and forests. There might be no signal for half a year once I went there. He would die if he couldn't contact me for half a year. In the previous life, I didn't go. I spent the last few decades of my life in regret. At that time, I was already unable to carry the heavy field photography equipment. In this life, I won't leave any regrets in my life. After giving Caius a definite answer, she immediately sent me the address. Fortunately, Caius wasn't involved in the shooting but organized the post-production staff at the base to edit videos, which enabled me to avoid the regrets of my previous life. I checked online and found that I needed to set off half a month in advance to arrive at the location on the 15th. Today was also the 15th. That is to say, I should set off on the 1st of next month. Unfortunately, the 1st of next month was the wedding day. Looking at the calendar I bought for the wedding before, I drew a circle on the 30th. There were still 15 days left, and then I could leave here and continue my dream of being a photographer. Thinking that one day in the future, my name would appear in the documentaries produced by National Geographic, I felt very excited. For a moment, I even smiled at the calendar on the wall. Suddenly, a hand abruptly drew a circle on the 1st. Then came Lilith's gentle and generous voice. "Sister, if I could marry Leofric, I would also count the days like this. Don't be embarrassed." I then came to my senses and also realized that Lilith thought I was afraid that my little thought of wanting to marry Leofric would be exposed. So she deliberately drew the time on the day before. In fact, I just wanted to avoid being dragged to have my bone marrow drawn, so I planned to leave one day earlier. Well, it didn't matter. Since she was no longer an important person to me, there was no need to explain. However, the smile on my face faded away. Leofric brought Lilith back again without asking me. But the house was bought by Leofric. Now it seemed that only I wasn't qualified to live here. Thinking of this, I suddenly felt relieved. Seeing that I didn't respond to her words, Lilith looked pitifully at Leofric. "Airless, Lilith is talking to you. How can you be so rude and not reply?" Leofric looked displeased. Reply? Did he want to see me being jealous as before? "I don't feel embarrassed at all," I said coldly and then turned around and went to my own room. I went back to my room, closed the door and put on my headphones. The outside world was cut off from me. Wildlife photography is not only a test of skills but also a test of physical strength. Previously, in order to build up my physical strength, I bought some dumbbells and sandbags and also got a membership card at the gym. I lifted dumbbells while listening to music. When I was sweating all over, suddenly I saw Leofric's angry face on the balcony. He was still talking nonstop that I took off my headphones. He had already entered the room. He snatched the dumbbell from my hand and threw it hard onto my bed. "Airless, can't you be more sensible? Lilith is worried to death about you, but you're still here listening to music and lifting dumbbells." As he said this, he angrily opened the door. "I told you she'd be fine. You just had to worry and made me climb through the window for fear that something might happen to her." I looked at my bed. My laptop was smashed by the dumbbell but Leofric seemed to have completely ignored it. My heart seemed to break along with it. Tears welled up in my eyes. Finally, I stubbornly held them back. After a long while, I turned around and saw Lilith lowering her head and looking at me provocatively. She was always like this, creating something out of nothing and making me be disliked by Leofric for no reason. I would have been angry before, but now I really didn't care. I just felt sorry for my laptop which cost me 10,000 yuan. "Don't you know you're wrong?" Leofric looked at my expression. "Why did you close the door? You didn't answer the phone. People would think you were going to commit suicide. You made Lilith worry to death. Why is she worried about me?" Even if she was worried, she had leukemia, not a heart disease. Could it really worry her to death? Besides, her leukemia was just pretended. But I didn't say anything. I would wait until the end and leave Leofric a big surprise when I left. How can you be so cold-blooded? Lilith is worried about you. What's your attitude? Leofric looked as if he was disappointed in me, as if I had done something extremely unforgivable. Leofric, forget it. Maybe sister thought I was unhappy here and that's why she closed the door, Lilith said, and then tears started falling down. Leofric, maybe I should go back. Sister, I'm sorry. I won't come to bother you again. Please don't lock the door in the future. It's very dangerous. If you faint, people outside won't know. I almost died when I was a kid. She said this as if she was on the verge of crying. I wasn't interested in it at all. Why are you going back? Your parents are on a business trip. You'll be alone at home. If something happens, who will take care of you? Leofric carefully wiped away her tears. This is my house. I have the final say. I wasn't interested in watching their boring performance. I closed the door expressionlessly, cutting them off outside the door. I walked to the bed, put the dumbbell on the ground, picked up my laptop. There were many photos in it that I had taken at the risk of my life. They were my most precious memories. Looking at the almost completely cracked computer, tears fell down again. Leofric knew how precious this laptop was to me. What he smashed wasn't just the laptop, but also my efforts over the years. I used to tell Leofric that it was the proof of my efforts for my dream. Now that it was broken, it seemed that my efforts stored in it for so many years were also shattered. In the previous life, it was my only comfort. In this life, I can realize my dream in person. I put it into my bag. I can give up Leofric, but I really can't bear to part with this laptop. Just after I put it away, I heard a loud noise from the door. It sounded like the sound of an engine. Looking at the trembling door, I realized what the people outside the door were doing. That crazy guy was using an electric drill to remove my lock cylinder. I opened the door. Leofric and the electric drill were pushed forward a bit, and Leofric's head hit the door. Leofric, are you okay? Lilith held Leofric, looking as if she was about to cry from worry. Sister, why did you suddenly open the door? Leofric is injured. Leofric was worried that you locked the door and might hurt yourself. Why don't you understand Leofric's love for you? If someone loved me like this, I would have no regrets in this life. Aren't you only going to live for a few more years? Can't you find a man in a few years? I walked around her and went outside. I didn't want to watch these two people's self-moving performance anymore. A crazy guy and a crazy girl. In the previous life, Lilith married a rich man. As a result, she gave birth to Leofric's son. After the rich man died, the three of them lived a happy life with the rich man's money. Actually, Leofric's family was also quite wealthy. If I hadn't experienced the things in my previous life, I couldn't have imagined that Leofric could do such things. Airless, if you go out, don't come back in the future. And don't get married either. When I walked to the door, Leofric shouted. I paused. There were only half a month left. It would be troublesome to go out and look for a house. The hotel is not clean. When it comes to renting an apartment here, it's usually 2 months' rent as a deposit and paying 1 month's rent in advance, and the lease is for at least 1 year. If you move out before the lease term ends, the deposit won't be refunded. Moving out within 15 days would cost too much. In the past 2 years, because Leofric didn't want me to, I hardly worked. Every time I received a photography job offer, Leofric would always review it. If the leader of the other party was too handsome, too rich, or too powerful, it wouldn't be okay. Here were all kinds of reasons for it not to be okay. In the end, hardly any job could pass his review. I couldn't do any work, and as a result, I was the one paying for all the household expenses. My previous savings had almost run out in these 2 years. Now, the money I have in my pocket can barely afford the plane ticket to the shooting location. After deducting the money for meals on the way and car rental, there's hardly anything left. Even if the project team reimburses me, it won't be settled until I arrive at the destination. Suddenly, I realized that I, who used to earn tens of thousands of yuan for each job in the past, was now an out-and-out pauper. How terrifying it is to be a love fool. I gave up my career, was taken advantage of financially, was constantly manipulated and looked down upon. Fortunately, Leofric wanted to keep himself chaste for his first love, so at least my body wasn't taken advantage of. Thinking of this, I turned around and went back to the living room, sprawled lazily on the sofa, and turned on the TV to watch. Seeing that I gave in, Leofric's expression became much better. After confirming that the lock was broken and couldn't be locked anymore, he came over and sat beside me, patiently peeling an orange for me. Airless, don't be so headstrong in the future. If you behave yourself, can't we live a good life together? Yeah, for him, having 4 people in his life didn't seem crowded at all. In the previous life, while he was affectionate with me, he also had a child with Lilith. I don't know what Leofric was really feeling in his heart when Lilith was intimate with her husband. It should be jealousy. After all, in the previous life, when he was 50 years old, when he heard that that man had died, he was happier than when the enemies who killed his parents died. I didn't eat the orange he peeled and just held it in my hand. My eyes were on the TV, and I replied perfunctorily, okay. There was a bang from the kitchen. The sofa bounced up suddenly. Then I saw Leofric running towards the kitchen. Lilith, what's wrong with you? After that, Lilith was carried out by Leofric and placed on the sofa. I moved aside in disgust. Alas, what's wrong with me? Lilith woke up in Leofric's arms looking as if she was falling apart. Leofric, I'm sorry. I was just thinking of cooking for you and sister, but I didn't expect to faint. Leofric got worried. Why are you cooking? You're not feeling well. I silently took out my phone and typed in Baidu, do leukemia patients often faint? Baidu replied to me, leukemia may cause fainting, but the probability and frequency of fainting are not particularly high. It seemed that Lilith had also checked the relevant symptoms of leukemia. No matter what the frequency was, as long as there was such a possibility, Leofric would believe her without hesitation. Airless, go and cook. My hand paused. In the past, I would definitely have gone obediently. After all, there was a sick person who was on the verge of death now, and Leofric needed to take care of the patient at the moment. But how could I go now? I clutched my stomach. It hurt so much. I'm having my period. With a pained expression on my face, I looked at Leofric helplessly. Why don't we order takeout? And please order a cup of brown sugar water for me, by the way. After saying that, I clutched my stomach and trotted back to my own room. Leofric was full of shock, but he had seen me rolling on the bed in pain during my period before. In the past, he would also prepare a hot water bag for me, boil ginger soup, and make brown sugar water. Now he had long forgotten when my period was. So when I said I was having my period, he was stunned because he couldn't tell whether I was telling the truth or not. He always said he loved me, but surely he couldn't say that he didn't remember the time of my period. After all, he had sworn before that he would let me not do any work during my period for the rest of my life and just enjoy the queen-like service he provided. Although that was years ago. Lilith, who was in Leofric's arms, was also stunned. According to the plan, at this moment, she and Leofric should be affectionate with each other, and Airless could only act like a servant and cook in the kitchen for them. Leofric, takeout is not clean. I'm not in good health, and the doctor said it's best not to eat takeout. Her coquettish voice made me feel sick even though I was in the guest room. Unfortunately, there was a hole drilled in the door, and the voice couldn't be blocked. I lay on the bed, thinking about how to get through these 15 days. I showed up at the gym. I bought an annual membership card for the gym when I signed up for a project before. It would expire in a few months. After entering the gym, I started working out, specifically choosing exercises to build up my strength. At noon, I bought a fat loss meal at the gym. While having lunch, I bought a plane ticket and also rented a car online. I would drive to the photography destination, and the people in the project team would help me return the car when the time came. I also spent the afternoon at the gym. I felt happy that I could exercise and avoid those crazy people on this day. I couldn't remember when was the last time I was so happy. I hadn't experienced the feeling of sweating profusely for a long time. It was really addictive. Unfortunately, I couldn't work out like this every day. When I got back to my place in the evening, Lilith and Leofric were having dinner at the table, looking harmonious and happy, like a family. Every time Lilith fainted, she could always stay here for 5 days. Only when Leofric was sure that she wouldn't faint again would he let her go back. Anyway, Leofric's house had 4 bedrooms, and each bedroom had its own bathroom. I just regarded it as sharing the rent with others. Sister, you're back. Leofric cooked the meal specially for you. Come and have dinner together. Lilith's affected voice rang out again. Only then did I take a look at the dishes on the table. There were only leftovers, and there was no rice left. I didn't know what I was supposed to eat. I smiled faintly. I've eaten outside. Airless, where did you go today? Why didn't you send me a message all day? If you take on all kinds of messy photography jobs, if you get cheated by others, I won't help you. Leofric, who had been silent all along, slammed his bowl onto the table. Didn't I tell you before that you should report your itinerary to me every day so that I can find you? When I looked up, I saw Lilith's smile that she couldn't suppress. I went to the gym. I spent over 10,000 yuan on the membership card before, and it would be a waste not to use it. Not wanting to argue, I just replied casually. Anyway, Leofric couldn't possibly think that I was going to the gym because I wanted to leave. Hearing this, Leofric's face finally softened a little. Wash the dishes. I'm tired from cooking, and Lilith is not feeling well. Lilith tidied her new wig. Thank you, sister. I really wanted to know whether Lilith had shaved her head bald or not. Before, I thought she wore wigs every day for the sake of beauty. Now I suddenly realized that maybe the wigs were just to cover up that she still had long hair. Lilith was that kind of person who loved beauty so much. Even when she was pretending to be sick, she still wanted to look beautiful with her sick makeup. How could she bear to become a real bald person? When I took a break at the gym today, I checked that usually, leukemia patients need to shave their heads. Before I could reply, both Leofric and Lilith had gone back to their rooms. In the past, I would indeed have agreed. I was afraid of being criticized if I argued with someone who didn't have many years left to live. Today, looking at the pile of leftovers, I couldn't help feeling sick. Suddenly, I remembered that before Lilith came back to China, if Leofric knew I was having my period, he definitely wouldn't let me touch cold water. Back in my room, I put on a mask and took 2 packs of tissues. I cleared all the things on the table and put them in the kitchen, then closed the kitchen door. I put on gloves, poured detergent onto the tissues, and wiped all the food residues off the plates and bowls with the tissues soaked with detergent. Then I put these things in the oven to dry them. Looking at the clean and tidy plates and bowls, I placed them neatly on the shelf in the kitchen with satisfaction. These bowls and plates were just like Leofric and Lilith. They looked clean and tidy on the outside, but in fact, they were really disgusting. Later, Lilith's voice came from behind again. Sister, thank you for your hard work. I'm not feeling well, so I'll have to rely on you to take care of me more in the future. Lilith used to like to say such things to irritate me. I would always become hysterical before. Now I looked listless. It's okay. I won't argue with someone who's dying. You. Not getting the hysterical reaction she expected from me but being called a dying person instead, her expression became distorted and hideous. She looked back and saw that Leofric's door was closed tightly. Sister, don't you think Leofric likes you? Let me tell you, only the ones that can't be obtained will always stay in a man's heart. You're the one who throws yourself at him, and you're worthless. I sneered. Wasn't Lilith also throwing herself at him? It's just that she was more skillful than me. She was always finding excuses to live in someone else's house. Wasn't that also throwing herself at him? On the 13th day, I had some friends who were photographers in the city. Before, because Leofric didn't want me to, I had gradually distanced myself from them. There was one person who had always been actively contacting me. Thinking of saying goodbye to her before leaving, I made an appointment with her to go shopping in the mall together. But she happened to have a wedding to photograph today, and it was a wedding of a very important person. Airless, why don't you help me? Today, one of my employees has diarrhea and keeps running to the toilet. I was just thinking about where to find someone to help out in a hurry. She chose to work in the wedding photography business later. She didn't earn much, but she liked the lively atmosphere. She said that watching others get married was like seeing herself being happy too. And I was a person who liked quietness, so I chose wildlife photography. When I communicated with her before, I also knew that in the wedding photography industry, most jobs were reserved in advance. Those who were good at it were usually booked half a year or even a year in advance. Especially on auspicious days. There's no other way. Today is an auspicious day, and all the capable photographers have been reserved. Airless, if you help me out, I'll treat you to a great time tonight. When she said, treat you to a great time, she definitely meant spending more money than she earned today. She was a person who didn't like to take advantage of others. Okay, Blythe, send me the address. I'll go there right now. When I arrived at the scene, I realized what a big shot the client was. It was someone at the level of the young master of the Beijing social circle. When Blythe saw me, she hugged me with tears in her eyes. Airless, it's so great that you really came. You don't know that if I messed up today, I wouldn't be able to stay in this business anymore. The wedding scene was very lively with a lot of people. I originally wanted to take on the task of photographing the guests, but Blythe said that I was good at photography and insisted that I follow and photograph the bride and groom. The bride was beautiful, and the groom had an outstanding temperament. The two of them looked really good together, a perfect match. I followed them all the way, and I could create the effect of a magazine blockbuster for such a newlywed couple almost without much shooting skills. The shooting process was very pleasant, and I was quite satisfied when I saw the effect shown in the lens. Suddenly, I felt the happiness that Blythe had mentioned. When a couple in love gets married and it's a wedding blessed by their families, it can indeed make people feel happy. It's as if I were getting married myself. In my previous life, because of Lilith, I didn't manage to hold a wedding. It turns out that a wedding can be so happy. No wonder everyone wants a dreamy wedding. It wasn't until I followed the newlyweds to the last table that I felt a gaze as cold as ice, as if it were something tangible stabbing into my body. When I turned my head, I met Leofric's venomous gaze. Standing beside him was Lilith. The people at the table had all come with their families. He brought Lilith along. I was stunned for a moment. I was so surprised that I almost dropped the camera in my hand to the ground. This camera of Blythe's cost hundreds of thousands of yuan, and the photos in the camera were even more crucial in determining Blythe's career in this life. I managed to steady myself just in time and didn't let the camera fall. Fortunately, it was just the last table. Fortunately, Leofric didn't dare to make trouble in front of such important people either. I followed the newlyweds back to the backstage with heavy steps. I thought I had already gotten over the pain. But just knowing that they were now openly going around as a couple, I was still deeply hurt. Airless, are you okay? Blythe quickly took the camera from my hand and supported me. Sorry, Airless. I really didn't know that scoundrel Leofric was also coming to attend. He's really not a human being. He was about to marry you right away, but he brought another woman to the wedding. Isn't that slapping you in the face? He pretends to be decent, yet he didn't allow us to approach you, and even said he was jealous. But look at what he's doing outside. Blythe was so angry, but I couldn't hear what she was saying anymore. That night, I stayed at Blythe's house and didn't go out to have fun because I really didn't have the energy. Suddenly, I realized that although I thought I didn't care before, there was still a trace of expectation in my heart. My heart was aching and felt stuffy. I told Blythe that I was going to participate in a shooting assignment. Wow, Airless, I knew you could become an internationally renowned photographer in the future. You should go quickly and don't be reluctant. When you succeed in the future, don't forget me. Blythe couldn't wait to airdrop me to the rainforest right now. She wanted me to get rid of that scumbag immediately and become a famous photographer in the world. Our Airless will be recorded in history books in the future. A scumbag like Leofric doesn't deserve you. Blythe kept comforting me. However, my heart felt even more uncomfortable. Thinking about how I had confined myself for such a man in my previous life and lived a difficult life in the following decades, I felt so sad. Blythe, Thank you. Thank her for always supporting me. In the last days of my previous life, Blythe often came to play with me and kept saying, "Old sister, you could obviously become a shining star. Look at you. How silly you are." In the end, I ended up with nothing, neither money nor children. If it weren't for Airless, one could imagine how desolate my old age in the previous life would have been. Leofric even thought that he had condescended to give me the days before he was 50, and that I had taken advantage of him. That night, I called Caius again at Blythe's house and asked if I could go ahead of schedule. My rent happened to be due, and it was troublesome to renew the lease. Caius said that I could go ahead of schedule, and someone there had already helped the team with the logistics work. I was so happy that I cried. Finally, I could leave those two scumbags. After hanging up the phone, Blythe hugged me and burst into tears. "Airless, it will be hard for me to see you in the future. I'll miss you. You should send me your latest photos more often in the future." I knew that she also wanted to go out, but she had parents and relatives. Her parents and relatives all loved her deeply. She was the only child in the family and couldn't just abandon everything and leave. I had nothing. And I had no concerns. "Okay, whenever I arrive at a place with a signal in the future, I'll send you photos of the local scenery, folk customs, and animals." Finally, I comforted her for a long time before she calmed down. After coming out of Blythe's house, I was changing my plane ticket on the bench downstairs of her house. My originally excited heart suddenly sank. There were too few flights to that place, and they were all fully booked these days. The earliest date I could change my ticket to was 5 days later. So I changed it to 5 days later. Not wanting to go back and see those crazy people, I went to the gym again. To my surprise, when I arrived at the entrance of the gym, I saw Leofric and Lilith. The two of them seemed to be waiting for someone. Seeing me, Lilith showed her hypocritical smiling face again and said, "Sister, you're here." Leofric was a bit strange today. He didn't scold me at the first sight of me. Yeah. I had no intention of recognizing them as relatives and directly entered the gym and went to the front desk. I took out my card and was about to swipe it at the front desk. But the card in my hand was snatched away. Looking at my empty palm, I showed an expression as if looking at a fool. "What's this? What was he going crazy about?" Leofric said righteously, "Airless, look at how healthy you are. Just give this fitness card to Lilith to use. It's a waste for you to spend over 10,000 yuan on this card." When I got this card, in order to facilitate the transaction, the gym did say that it could be lent to relatives and friends. But why should I give it to her? I turned to the front desk and said, "She has leukemia. Do you dare to let her in? Can you afford it if something happens to her?" The fitness coach saw that Lilith looked weak and delicate and was about to step forward and say that it could be shared. But after hearing what I said, he took 2 steps back and gave the front desk a wink. The front desk embarrassedly explained to Leofric, "Sir, people with leukemia are really not suitable for the gym. There are a lot of people and bacteria in the gym, which is easy to cause infection and aggravate the illness." I gave a thumbs up to the front desk. She actually had knowledge about leukemia. If it weren't for the advertisement board beside which said that it could be shared with relatives and friends, I guess the front desk would have said that this card could only be used by oneself. "Then just give this card to me to use. You have nothing to do at home. Why do you come to the gym?" Leofric's shameless words made me laugh angrily. "Precisely because I'm bored that I come to the gym. Otherwise, do you want me to go to work?" I retorted. Leofric's face immediately changed. It seemed that he was stimulated and his face turned red and his neck thickened. I had never seen him like this before. He always maintained a decent appearance on the surface. "Airless, so you plan to go to the gym to seduce rich men together with Blythe, right?" Leofric's words made me powerless to explain. It was another baseless accusation. I looked at Lilith, and she was smiling smugly. Yes, she knew this man well and knew how to manipulate him. How could he allow me to climb up to a man better than him? He thought that I went to that wedding to seduce rich people. I've already told you that Blythe doesn't look like a good person at first glance. She's always flirting with married men. The people in the gym looked at the three of us strangely. Obviously, Leofric and Lilith were sticking together, and I stood on the opposite side like an enemy. Such a situation always felt strange. The front desk sensibly lowered its head and did its own thing, and the coach went to other trainees. I turned to the front desk and instructed, "This card was paid for by myself. Don't let anyone else use my card, you know?" The front desk nodded, "Okay, Ms. Wang. From now on, your card can only be used through face recognition." Leofric didn't expect the front desk to agree so quickly. He threw the card on the ground and stomped on it hard a few times. "If you do something to betray me, don't even think about marrying me in this life." After saying that, he pulled Lilith and left the gym. I picked up the card and threw it into the trash can. After such a commotion, I didn't have the face to exercise here anymore. I spent a whole day visiting all the places I had been to in the university, took pictures, and posted them on Moments. There were only pictures and no words. In the evening, I returned to Leofric's house, packed up all my documents, and put them into a small bag. I planned to wait until the two of them fell asleep and then go out and stay at Blythe's house for a few nights. There was a knock on the door of the room. "What's the matter?" I opened the door and saw Leofric with a look of deep affection that I couldn't understand. "It's time for dinner. I've already eaten." I was about to close the door. Then Lilith's voice came from the living room. "Sister, all the places you posted on Moments today were the places where you used to date Leofric, right?" Leofric was very touched when he saw them and specially cooked a dinner for you himself. "If you don't eat it, you'll hurt Leofric's heart." I was speechless for a moment. I just walked around the university. We had been in love for 4 years in college, and of course, our footprints were left in every corner of the university. It wasn't because of Leofric. I saw Leofric's face turn gloomy. I walked out of the room and came to the dining table. I didn't have the intention to eat. I just didn't want to waste my energy arguing with him. When I sat at the table, I found that none of the things on the table were to my liking. I hated the smell of mutton the most. The whole dining table smelled of mutton. I looked expressionless. Lilith sat opposite me, wanting to see me lose my composure. Leofric didn't notice these at all. It seemed that he really forgot that I didn't eat mutton. Lilith scooped a bowl of soup for Leofric. "Leofric, drink more mutton soup to warm yourself up." Then she casually scooped a bowl for me as well. "Sister, you also drink a bowl. Leofric has been boiling it for the whole afternoon." "Didn't Leofric go to work today?" I asked knowingly. Every time Leofric saw Lilith faint, he would stay at home to accompany her for 5 days for fear that she would die suddenly. Leofric said unnaturally, "There was nothing going on in the company today." Lilith happily drank the mutton soup and then looked at me puzzled. "Sister, why don't you drink it? Isn't it good?" "Leofric has been boiling it for the whole afternoon." I ignored her, stirred the rice in the bowl with chopsticks, and was lost in thought. Leofric put down his chopsticks unhappily. "Airless, I've cooked lunch for you all afternoon. What else do you want? Didn't you manage to keep the fitness card from Lilith? What are you jealous about?" These words brought me back to my senses. Am I jealous? I didn't do anything. Why was I said to be jealous again? "Airless, it's because Leofric loves you that he spoils you like this. There's nothing between Leofric and me." "What on earth are you jealous about?" Lilith said coquettishly. It almost made me vomit. "You're overthinking it. How could I be jealous of a dying person?" Hearing the words, "dying person," Lilith gritted her teeth but didn't dare to show it in front of Leofric. I watched the rich expressions on her face change. Finally, she burst into sobs. "I know I don't have long to live, but sister always says." She didn't finish her sentence and cried even harder. "But in the 2 years since you returned to China, haven't you been saying all the time that you don't have many years left to live?" My voice was light. Lilith fell to the ground and fainted. Well, this time, we would have to stay here for another 5 days. I don't know if it hurts when she falls down like this every time. Anyway, I don't have the courage to do so. Seeing Lilith faint, Leofric was completely panicked. "Airless." His voice was loud and then he went to pick up Lilith and rushed to the hospital. I also followed Leofric into the car. I wanted to see which doctor was treating her. There must be someone on the inside in the hospital who could help her get away with it every time. The moment I saw the doctor, I was stunned. This doctor had almost the same eyebrows and eyes as Lilith's son in the previous life. I mean, before Lilith used to parade her son in front of me all day long, and I never suspected that he was Leofric's son. It turns out that Leofric wasn't the real father at all. For days to go, I took my ID and went to Blythe's house. Blythe specially gave me a key, saying that if she was too busy at work and couldn't make it back in time, I could open the door and get my things by myself. Looking at the heavy key, my heart softened. I originally planned to stay at Blythe's house for a few days, but thinking that Leofric was a bit crazy and might drag me back and not let me go out, which would make me miss the chance to go abroad, I finally went back to the Gu family's house. Anyway, it was just like watching a show. He wouldn't sleep with me. After knowing that in my previous life he had raised someone else's son for a lifetime, I also felt relieved. He didn't gain anything either. I stayed at home for a day, and neither Leofric nor Lilith was at home. No need to guess. They were surely at the hospital. I took the opportunity to destroy all my private items that belonged only to me. For clothes and pants, I only kept the ones I planned to take away and threw away the rest. As for the other things, like the gifts Leofric gave me before and the love letters he wrote to me in the past, instead of just throwing them into the trash can, I sent them all to the storage room. Then I bought several bottles of black paint and sprayed them all black. All the things turned black. Even this house. When I left, I sprayed a layer of black paint on it. Finally, I used several bottles of super glue to seal the whole door and the lock. 3 days to go, I packed the clothes I planned to take away and took them to Blythe's house. I only left the clothes I was wearing in my pajamas. Then I went to my high school campus. The high school had changed a lot. I took some photos and posted them on Moments. Lilith gave me a like and left a comment, "Sister, you're so happy that you can go out and have fun. I can only lie in the hospital bed." I ignored her and didn't even bother to look at her Moments. I knew that she had posted a lot of moments that were only visible to me again, but I wouldn't look at them anymore. She left a comment here just to remind me to check her Moments. Soon, Leofric replied to her, "What's there to envy? I'll accompany you next time, Lilith." "Thank you, Leofric. You're so nice, Leofric, only now do you know that I'm nice." I ignored the strange and perverted tastes of these two people. Obviously, we were face to face, yet they still went crazy in my Moments. Just when I was about to leave the high school, I received a call from Leofric. "Are you still at school? Getting ready to leave? Wait a minute. I'll come to pick you up." Thinking that I could save the taxi fare, I decided to take the free ride. I was broke now. A free driver was not to be missed. I sat at the school gate, staring blankly at the sky. I didn't see Leofric sticking his head out of the car until I heard the horn of the car in front of me. "Get in the car." I walked around to the passenger seat on the other side. My outstretched hand froze in midair. Lilith looked at me with a smile. "Hello, sister." Leofric knew that I also wanted to come here and have a look, so he brought me along. "Please be our tour guide." "Thank you." She was really shameless. "Well, just consider it as the fare. And to avoid any trouble. Today would be over soon. There were only 2 days left. Hold on. Once I got on the plane, everything would be over." The car drove into the school all the way. Leofric carefully explained every brick, tile, tree, and plant in the school to Lilith all the way. "I really envy sister. It's okay that you went to the same university, but you also went to the same high school." Just when I thought that Lilith was going to say that she didn't have many years left to live again, she suddenly changed the topic. "Sister, you're so happy." Hearing such words, Leofric's vanity was satisfied, and the corners of his mouth couldn't be suppressed. "Yes, I'm happy in this life. I wouldn't be tied to these 2 scumbags and play their 5-person game with them anymore." Maybe it wasn't just 5 people. In my previous life, not getting sick was really a great blessing for me. Hearing my words, Leofric was even happier. For the first time, He put his arm around my waist in front of Lilith. In the future, when you want to go back to our alma mater and remember our past, remember to call me. Ugh, I felt like vomiting. He was so self-righteous that he thought I went back to school because of him. Leofric went to the toilet. Lilith and I waited for him outside. Lilith rarely showed a distorted expression. Airless, don't think that you can hold on to Leofric with memories of the past. I'm the one he can't have. As long as I'm willing, you'll never have a wedding. I smiled faintly. In the previous life, she did succeed. So I really couldn't refute it. I kept telling myself in my heart that the third day from the end would soon be over. Don't cause any more trouble, don't disrupt the plan, and don't end up like in the previous life. 2 days to go, I was woken up from my sleep by the knock on the door. What's the matter? With my messy hair, I saw Leofric outside the door. Sister, it's already 9 o'clock. Why haven't you got up yet? Only then did I realize that Leofric was dressed in a suit and tie, and Lilith was in a long dress, looking like a perfect couple. Seeing that I had no reaction, Leofric's face, which was originally full of pride, suddenly darkened. Airless, today is the day for us to try on our wedding dresses. Only then did I realize that there was still the step of trying on wedding dresses. Well, why don't you two try them on? Anyway, you have similar figures. After I said this casually, strange expressions appeared on the faces of the two people at the door. Did I touch on their secrets? How can your wedding dress be tried on by others? Leofric was a bit irritable. He tugged at his tie. You have 10 minutes. It was an order that couldn't be refused. I knew that if I refuted it this time, I would get the so-called punishment. I didn't care about other things, but I was afraid that he wouldn't let me go out. The time was almost up. I got dressed and went out in 5 minutes. Lilith looked at me as if she wanted to bore holes in me. What are you looking at? If you want to try it on, you can try it on later. I don't mind. As long as she didn't suddenly fall seriously ill and force me to go and donate my bone marrow. Lilith's expression froze. Sister, don't you like Leofric anymore? I was about to say something when Leofric had already driven the car to us. I got into the back seat, and surprisingly, Lilith also got into the back seat. I moved away in disgust and leaned against the door to look at the scenery outside. Then I received a message from Lilith. Sister, don't you really like Leofric anymore? I ignored her. She was too scheming. I wouldn't tell her my true thoughts. I never thought that she liked Leofric that much. If she really liked him, how could she be with so many men? If she really loved Leofric, how could she not give birth to Leofric's child? She just liked to snatch things. Just like a child, the things snatched are the best. Seeing that I ignored her, Lilith also closed her eyes and went to sleep. When we arrived at the place, sure enough, when Lilith saw the dress, the first thing she said was, "The dress is so beautiful. Can I try it on?" Leofric looked at me. I smiled and said to the staff, "Help this lady put it on." Hearing my answer, the corners of Leofric's mouth twitched. "Are you willing to let Lilith try it on? You should also go and try it on. Just see how well you match." I didn't reply to him but urged him to try on the clothes. Hearing the words, matching effect, his eyes lit up. When Leofric had changed into his suit, Lilith hadn't come out yet. Leofric was very nervous, as if his bride was about to come out. Sure enough, the things that couldn't be obtained were the most exciting. The dress was very beautiful, making Lilith look radiant. Leofric was stunned. I asked the staff to quickly take a few photos for them to confirm the effect. The staff had never seen such a cowardly, legal wife, like me, and looked at me with anger and contempt. Lilith and Leofric were very satisfied with the effect and asked the staff to take a lot more photos. It was only when they were tired that they remembered me. Sister, I'm sorry. I was so happy that I forgot about you. The staff beside her gave her a disdainful look. Obviously, they didn't want you to remember. I smiled. It's okay as long as you're happy. If you're not happy, you'll die soon. I turned around and explained to the staff, my sister has leukemia and could die at any time. So please don't make her angry. The staff, who were quite enthusiastic just now, immediately took several steps back as if they had seen a plague. Airless, it's a happy occasion. What inauspicious words are you saying? Leofric's face darkened, and he immediately shouted at me. I waved my hand and sighed helplessly. I got it. Only she can mention that she's dying. I can't. How are the clothes? If you're satisfied, let's just settle on them. I changed the topic. Leofric looked at me in confusion. Aren't you going to try them on? I, airless, wouldn't touch something dirty. I have a heavy menstrual flow. If I try them on and get them dirty, there won't be enough time to make new ones before the wedding. This explanation made Leofric relieved. Then let's settle on this set. I also let Lilith try on all the toasting dresses later. Lilith's look at me became weirder and weirder, changing from the previous disgust and complacency to curiosity and confusion. The sense of accomplishment she got from snatching things disappeared in an instant. Sure enough, she didn't love Leofric. She just liked to compete with me. The last day, I got up with an extremely relaxed mood. I put my pajamas and toiletries into a small bag and went out. Leofric and Lilith were not at home. I sent a message to Blythe. She wasn't at home and told me to go there by myself. I put my things at her house and then found that it was so boring to be alone. Over the years, I had somehow lost all my connections. I walked downstairs, and a red sports car stopped in front of me. Airless. It was Blythe in the car. My heart warmed. When I called her just now, she was obviously at the wedding rehearsal site. I could clearly hear the sound of the rehearsal. Will it affect your work? Of course not. I originally planned to ask you to have dinner with me today. It's still early. Let's go shopping. Blythe smiled brightly. I got into the car. The convertible sports car drove all the way to the largest shopping mall in the city. The sports car really attracted a lot of attention. Many people greeted us along the way. This car was originally intended for the bride. Later, I found that most brides had their own cars, so now I'm the only one using it. I knew that Blythe was worried that I would dislike her. Before, the reason why Leofric didn't let me get in touch with her was that she was too outgoing and liked to attract men, as he put it. In fact, it's just that if you are charming, people will be attracted to you. He, however, described it as attracting men in a bad way and thought she had bad intentions. I like it. When I stop traveling around in the future, I'll also buy such a car and live a carefree and flamboyant life. I opened my arms and embraced the sunlight. Seeing my action, Blythe finally felt relieved. I was afraid that you'd be love-struck again and give up this opportunity. Her suspicion was reasonable. This wasn't the first time. It had happened many times. It won't happen again. This time is different from before. I had already lived through a life that was engraved in my heart. A failed life. That's good. Don't look back. That kind of man isn't worth it. Blythe tried every possible way to persuade me and bought me a lot of outdoor protective items such as windbreakers, waterproof clothes, hats, and gloves. In the end, I could only treat her to a big meal. The budget was only 1,000 yuan. After buying the plane ticket and renting the car, there was only 1,500 yuan left in my bank card. It was the best farewell meal I could afford for her. It was also a private restaurant that we used to like to go to. The dishes there were rich in variety and had an authentic taste. In the early years, we used to go there in a group. Now there were only the two of us. When we arrived, it happened to be the last available table. What good luck, Blythe couldn't help sighing. In the past, we had to wait for a long time to get a reservation when we came here. Just as we walked in, someone stopped us. Sister, it was Lilith's voice. She always disgusted me with that gentle voice. Needless to say, she must have come out to have dinner with Leofric again. I pretended not to hear and walked inside with Blythe. Unexpectedly, Lilith followed us. Sister, you're also having dinner. Let's share a table, Lilith said. Blythe looked at her impatiently. Who are you? Who wants to share a table with you? Just because I only invited her for this farewell meal today, she could tell that the person in front of her definitely didn't have a good relationship with me, and her voice sounded so affected. When she saw Leofric, she immediately got angry. You guys wait in line. Airless, let's have dinner together. I was actually planning to ask you to have dinner with me, Leofric stepped forward and tried to hold my hand, but I skillfully avoided it. He only said that he was planning to ask me to have dinner when we were already in the restaurant. He couldn't even make up a believable lie. Blythe was quite intimidated when she saw Leofric. She had always thought that he had a dark heart. I thought about it. It was the last day and I didn't want any unexpected changes, so I agreed. Let's have dinner together. When we sat down at the table, I looked at Leofric and said, Leofric, you'll pay the bill today, right? Usually, when it was just the two of us, Leofric wouldn't take the initiative to pay the bill. But with Lilith here, he probably wouldn't have the nerve to refuse. I didn't want to spend the last bit of money in my pocket on these two crazy people. Of course. I'm a man, so of course I'll pay the bill, Leofric replied. After getting the answer, I kicked Blythe's foot gently. Blythe reacted quickly and chose the most expensive dishes on the menu. The prices in this place were not cheap. The most expensive dishes were over 1,000 yuan each. Dishes costing several hundred yuan were common, and the cheapest ones were only a few dozen yuan, but there were very few of those. However, the taste was really good and the ingredients were excellent. We always had to wait in line every time we came here. We only came here on special occasions to satisfy our taste buds. Braised abalone and pork ribs, caviar sushi, braised beef in soy sauce, sweet and sour pork ribs, ginger and scallion braised oyster casserole, drunken osmanthus hairy crabs, baked lobster with cheese. Blythe hadn't finished reading the list when Lilith considerately interrupted. There are only 4 of us. That's enough. Leofric couldn't even force a smile anymore. Seeing that he couldn't smile, I felt secretly delighted. That's not enough. The portions here are all very small. I can eat 4 plates by myself. Airless can also eat 4 plates. Then there won't be any left for you too, Blythe said. Ignoring Lilith's opinion, Blythe knew too well about Leofric's character of being overly concerned about his face. She ordered 4 more dishes. Then she reluctantly said to Leofric, Leofric, I originally wanted to order the most expensive ones. But thinking that I might eat too much, I ordered some ordinary dishes. Can you handle it? If you're not satisfied, we can change to the most expensive ones. Looking at Leofric's forced smile, I almost burst out laughing. The total cost of this meal was over 5,000 yuan. Lilith glared at Blythe resentfully. You're so wasteful. Blythe looked at her affected appearance and scratched her own hair. I'm a person who earns money. Being thrifty is for those who don't want to earn money but just want to save it. After saying that, Leofric didn't know what to say. Blythe and I toasted with fruit juice instead of wine. Everything was understood without words. I'll stay at Blythe's place tonight, I mentioned to Leofric when the meal was almost over. After tonight, when I got on the plane, everything in the past would no longer matter. Leofric slammed his bowl onto the table heavily and dragged Lilith out. Blythe quickly called the waiter. Quick! Ask that gentleman to pay the bill. He's treating. If you let him run away, we won't pay. She shouted loudly. The waiter quickly followed them. The bill for this table was quite a lot of money. After saying that, she doubled over with laughter. After so many years, I finally tricked this bastard once. He didn't let you work and yet spent your money. What a fucking asshole. He paraded his mistress in front of his girlfriend all day long. I don't know what's going on in his head. When she said the first sentence, I felt the strange looks from the people around us. By the time Blythe finished speaking, everyone lowered their heads, pretending not to hear but couldn't help stealing glances at me. Stealing glances at me, the poor victim. After being reborn, I had already figured it out. He doesn't think that's a mistress. He just thinks that he's taking care of a sick person. He thinks he's noble. He doesn't think he's cheating. With 2 women under his protection, he felt a great sense of accomplishment. Lilith had always been obedient to him from the beginning to the end, which made him very satisfied. In comparison, I was a bit rebellious and needed to be disciplined. Blythe drove her red convertible sports car to the airport. Airless, if you become wealthy in the future, don't forget me. I smiled helplessly. Blythe was the only daughter of a wealthy family. Even if I became the most famous photographer in the world, I couldn't be wealthier than her. Keep in touch. Tears slid down from the corners of my eyes. Her cell phone kept ringing with calls urging her. I asked her to go back to work first. In the end, she still waited until it was time for me to board the plane before leaving. I knew that she was afraid that I would change my mind before boarding the plane. The worry in her eyes couldn't be hidden at all. It was almost like she was directly telling me not to turn back. Blythe was a person who didn't like to swear, but when it came to Leofric, she would call him all kinds of bad names. After boarding the plane, a message from Leofric showed up on my phone. You're becoming more and more disobedient. You'd better reflect on yourself at that woman's place. If you don't reflect well, don't come back. How ridiculous. He was at home every day, but he didn't even notice that there was nothing left in my wardrobe. The storage room couldn't be opened either. All I can say is that taking care of Lilith left him with no extra energy to care about anything else. I replied with an okay. I took the SIM card out of my phone, put in a newly bought card, and sent a message to Blythe. Then I blocked Leofric and Lilith's phone numbers and WeChat accounts. Before blocking Lilith's WeChat account, I glanced at her recent moments. They were all about Leofric. It was just like she was in a passionate love. Now all of this had nothing to do with me. When the plane took off, I threw the SIM card and the ring on my hand into the trash can in the toilet. I soared in the blue sky and was no longer trapped in that small place. After 2 transfers and renting a car with many twists and turns, half a month later, I finally arrived at the location Caius had given me. It was a point on the African savanna. The logistics staff had set up tents here. The members of the project team had already finished shooting the current rainforest and were on their way here. They would arrive in a few days. Looking at my phone, there was no signal. The last thing on it was the chat conversation with Blythe before I got in the car. I drove the car rented by the project team and took a tour around the savannah, and took some photos along the way. The remaining photographers would arrive in a week. They were all people whose works could often be seen in photography magazines. I was very excited. My photos had also won awards in international photography competitions before. Although I was a dozen years younger than them, they didn't treat me as a novice at all. I took on the same intensity of shooting tasks as them. As a result, I grew up very quickly. The shooting on the African savanna ended half a year later. Half a year later, I, who used to be a fair and delicate girl, had been tanned to almost black. But the whole temperament of my face had completely changed. I was already able to complete all the shooting processes confidently. I no longer worried about lacking experience and holding back the team members. Before my phone regained the signal, my confident interviews and shooting footage had been posted online. In the opening credits of National Geographic and in the interviews with photographers, I, with my half-black complexion among a group of white people, was very eye-catching, and because I was the youngest, I quickly became famous in China. As soon as my phone got a signal, I heard Blythe's screaming voice coming from WeChat. Sending text messages could no longer satisfy her desire to talk. There were one message after another in voice form. It showed how happy she was for me. I replied to her with a message. We're moving to another place. Blythe replied instantly, teasing me. In the future, if I want to know your latest news, I'll have to watch TV. There was no signal at the shooting location. The sample photos taken were sent out every day for the editing department to edit and publish. Caius adjusted the shooting plan in time according to the audience's feedback. I made a phone call to Blythe in the car. I asked her how she was recently, and she said everything was fine. She told me to focus on the shooting. After I hung up the phone, a WeChat message caught my attention. It turned out that I had disappeared. Leofric had gone crazy looking for me. He went to find Blythe every day. When Blythe didn't tell him where I was, he would sabotage every wedding she was photographing. Blythe was so harassed that she had now gone home to inherit the family property. The person who sent the message was a good friend of Blythe's and also my former schoolmate. I slumped in the car. Thinking about how Blythe had just acted as if nothing had happened, I felt a bit sad. I sent a message to that person. Sorry, I just saw it. There's no signal on the savannah. She was typing for a long time. Finally, she replied, "Please don't tell Blythe." Okay. There were no other extra messages on my mobile phone number, but there were quite a few friend requests on WeChat. I didn't accept any of them. No matter what happened to Leofric, it had nothing to do with me. After 2 lifetimes, Blythe's character had been tested. Thinking about how her photography career was interrupted because of me, I felt really upset that I would rather she had told Leofric. 2 years later, I saw Leofric again after the project was completely filmed. I returned to Songqing to see Blythe. At this moment, I wasn't just half black anymore. I had become bronze-colored. Blythe recognized me at first glance at the airport. "Black Airless," she said with a big smile, showing her white teeth. I quickly walked up to her. She was wearing a beautiful dress. I was wearing camouflage clothes, with my hair tied up in a bun and wearing sunglasses. "How did you recognize me?" It was her who asked me to wear sunglasses to avoid being poached by others because domestic photography organizations wanted to recruit me. But she recognized me at a glance. I felt like wearing the sunglasses was useless. I couldn't help it. "You're the darkest one in the crowd, haha." She laughed heartily. We got into her sports car again. This time we came to her small villa, a 3-story villa. "You can live on the 2nd floor. I'll live on the 3rd floor," Blythe said with a big wave of her hand, looking very generous. "You're now an internationally renowned photographer. You shouldn't be wronged." "Okay, then I'll live on the 2nd floor and pay you rent." After 2 years of shooting, I had earned a lot of money. I was no longer poor. The doorbell rang. It was Leofric. That scoundrel. He's actually following me again. I'll go out and meet him. I couldn't let Blythe's normal life be disturbed again. At the entrance of the villa, Leofric and I stood facing each other. We hadn't seen each other for 2 years, and he seemed to have aged 10 years. He was no longer as energetic as he used to be. "You're still as beautiful as ever." He tried to hold my hand, but I dodged it.mr. "Goo, if you have something to say, please just say it. I didn't marry Lilith. In my heart I've only ever wanted to marry you." Before he could finish speaking, Lilith had already arrived. Leofric. The 3 of us stood facing each other, and it was indescribably strange. "Leofric, are you really going to abandon me? You said before that you would take care of me for the rest of my life." Lilith looked pitiful and sad, and she no longer had the confidence she had before. She was still wearing a wig, kneeling on the ground and looking at me. "Sister, you already have everything now. Do you still want to compete with me for Leofric?" Remembering that in my previous life, although Lilith had pretended to be sick, she had maintained an elegant and decent appearance all her life. "Take your person back," I said to Lilith. "Keep an eye on your people in the future." "Airless, what have I done? Why do you want to leave me?" Leofric roared heartbreakingly. "I don't love you anymore. You haven't done anything wrong. You're very nice. You're a kind-hearted person. But I don't like kind-hearted people. I like selfish men who can only have me in their hearts." "Airless, you're forcing me. I have nothing to do with Lilith. She's just a patient and doesn't have long to live. In my previous life, she lived longer than I did." He planned to come over and hold me. With a bang, Lilith fainted again. I couldn't help rolling my eyes inwardly. Leofric hesitated for a moment, then picked up Lilith and left. "Airless, wait for me. I'll come to find you." After I sent her to the hospital. It rained that night. Leofric got soaked in the rain all night. In the morning, he fainted, and it rained that night. Leofric got soaked in the rain all night. In the morning, he fainted, and Blythe called an ambulance for him. Leofric's parents came to find me. "Airless, Leofric is just kind-hearted. He has nothing to do with Lilith. He's been thinking about you these 2 years. Please forgive him." "I'm not kind-hearted. Besides, she has parents. How can he be so kind-hearted when he has no relatives or friends?" In the end, we had an unpleasant conversation and parted ways. Blythe said that in the past 2 years, his parents had persuaded Leofric to marry Lilith. Their families were also well matched in terms of family background, but Leofric refused. "He's just a lunatic," Blythe said, gritting her teeth with hatred. I felt the same way. One day later, Leofric stood in front of Blythe's villa again, this time with members of the media. He knelt in front of the villa and begged Blythe to return his wife to him. He was crying so hard that it seemed as if he could move heaven and earth. If it weren't for what had happened in my previous life, I would have almost been moved by him. Blythe poured a basin of water from upstairs, and the people in front of the door were drenched like drowned rats. Soon, the security guards in the community came and drove everyone away. If you let these flies in again next time, I'll sue you, Blythe said. Blythe owned quite a few villas in this community, and the security guards didn't dare to mess with her. However, the online public opinion didn't subside. I planned to open a photography studio in Beijing and wanted Blythe to take a stake in it. It wasn't to get her money but to show my gratitude for her continuous support. Photography was also her dream. If it weren't for Leofric, I would have preferred to open a photography studio in Songqing. He was really annoying, and Blythe was very happy. Finally, she joined the photography field in another way. When we were happily discussing the future plans for the studio, a group of people burst into Blythe's house. Leofric directly knelt down, followed by a group of reporters. "Airless, please save Lilith. Where are the security guards in the community? What are they doing?" Blythe grabbed a cup on the table and threw it at Leofric. Leofric didn't dodge, and immediately blood flowed down his forehead. Looking at the cameras one by one, I calmed Blythe down. I couldn't let her fall into the trap of online violence either. "Tell me, how can I save her?" I looked down at him from above. "Lilith's leukemia has suddenly become serious, and she urgently needs a bone marrow transplant. Please help her. You're the only one who can match her bone marrow now." Yes, saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. The reporter beside him also started to stir things up. "Please save my daughter." Two dark figures suddenly appeared in front of me without warning and then knelt down. These were Lilith's parents, whom I had never met in my previous life. How ridiculous. In my previous life, as Leofric's follower, I was directly taken there by force. Now they also plan to take me there by force. In this new life, they just changed the way. They must know that their daughter doesn't have leukemia. To make things difficult for me, they really went too far. "Okay, take me to see how she is now." Originally, I wanted to let them fend for themselves, but since they didn't want me to live in peace, then we'll all lose face together. Surrounded by cameras, I came to the ward. Lilith was lying on the hospital bed. She looked extremely haggard. Her face was sallow, as if she was about to die at any moment. I said to the cameras, "Can I be alone with the patient for 2 minutes?" Leofric and Lilith's parents looked at me warily. "Don't worry. I'm already successful now. I won't ruin my own future." Hearing me say this, everyone left the room. I closed the door and locked it. Then I walked to the bedside. "What are you up to?" Lilith jumped out of bed. I folded my arms and looked at her. "Aren't you dying? You seem quite energetic." Lilith's face changed. "I'm just afraid that you'll do something bad to me, so I'm trying my best." She pretended to be weak and got back into bed and lay down properly. "Let me tell you, if you dare to do anything to me, don't even think about staying in China in the future. All the reporters outside are on my side. I'm airless." Looking at the video camera that a certain reporter had forgotten to take away near the head of the bed.as a photographer, I'm very familiar with photographic equipment. Although it looked like a small handbag, it was actually a high-definition camera specifically used for disguised shooting. I calmly sat down by the window. "I didn't originally want to get involved with you. I've already given up on Leofric long ago. You guys just had to come and show off in front of me. And you still want my bone marrow. Do you deserve it?" I took out a disposable facial tissue from my bag. I had poured makeup remover oil on it before I came. Before Lilith could react, I quickly jumped onto the bed and sat on her. I covered her mouth and removed her makeup in 2 seconds. A face full of energy was revealed. In a certain reporter's live broadcast room, there was an uproar at that moment. The reporter received a call and rushed in immediately because he saw in the live broadcast that it seemed like someone was being killed. I in the picture, only I could be seen sitting on the bed, completely blocking Lilith's face. They couldn't see her fair and energetic face. There was a loud knocking on the door. Then came the sound of someone trying to break the door down. I jumped off the bed and casually took off Lilith's wig and wig cap. Her shiny black hair was revealed. The barrage in the live broadcast room suddenly stopped. Then there was a lot of commotion. Oh my God. The person on the bed was actually pretending to be critically ill by wearing makeup. Look at that shiny black hair. Who would have thought that she had undergone chemotherapy for years? Am I the only one who saw Airless's cool and efficient movements? She's a wildlife photographer. Without agile movements, she would have been eaten by wild animals long ago. By the time I got off the bed, the door had already been opened. This is a hospital. There's no way it could really be locked. Lilith's parents wanted to hit me as soon as they entered the room. I kicked them away with a couple of kicks. I had wanted to do this when I was at Blythe's villa just now. Leofric looked at me in disbelief. You don't want. Before he could finish speaking, he saw that the person who had been wearing a red wig on the bed now had shiny black hair. The originally haggard face had also disappeared. Lilith, you. Leofric spat out a mouthful of blood. I walked through the reporters and left the hospital. I passed by Leofric's parents. Alas. Leofric's mother let out a heavy sigh. I saw Leofric again 3 months later, at the studio that Blythe and I owned. Our business was doing very well. Many luxury brands asked us to take photos of wild animals and combine them with fashion models to create fashion masterpieces. Many companies also asked us to shoot public service films about wild animals. Our schedule was fully booked. For shootings that weren't too dangerous, I would take Blythe with me. This time, as Blythe and I were about to set off, we were stopped by Leofric. Airless, I really loved you before, but Lilith is pregnant. I have to marry her. Congratulations. Do a paternity test after the baby is born. After saying that, Blythe and I left, laughing and joking. 1 year later, I saw Leofric again. He covered his face and cried bitterly. Airless, did you already know that Lilith had other men and that the child isn't mine? Oh, I just guessed randomly. After all, she's always liked other men. You're hers now, and she's bound to find others. Green hat guy, haha. Blythe couldn't stop laughing. You're finally not that scoundrel goo anymore. Congratulations on upgrading to a green hat guy.